I had awful stage fright. I created speaking circles as the only way I could get out of it because Toastmasters just made me crazy. And I had to find an organic Marin, Northern California way through. So I've been doing it for 25 years around the world, wrote the book, and what I really am good at is in a group where we're dealing with people who have some anxiety about being in front of groups, any degree or a lot or a little. And this work is the pleasurable, holistic, spiritual way through where I first train the audience to be available, to be softly, co-mindfully here, to really see the essence of a human being up here, and to hold the space for them to be with one person at a time and find out what that's like, to see people so they feel seen as your highest priority. So this works wonders for people with anxiety in front of groups. And then I become a vegan because somebody at one of my circles, speaking in this incredibly persuasive, irresistible way that I help train them, starts talking about how great she feels after 2 years vegan, her energy. And within 30 seconds I said, ooh, I'm interested in that. And she mentioned Will Tuttle CD, which I got. That's what got her going, and the World Peace Diet, and I listened to it, and 45 minutes later, I got the health part from the person at the circle, and from him I got the health and the animals, and I was cooked by the time I was done. I got it. That was it for me. I went cold turkey, vegan. It was 2.5. It was 3 months ago. 3 months ago. And as I'm meeting all vegans, this wonderful community over the last few weeks, months, what I want is for us to be able to speak in this way that this woman spoke that got me. What is it? How can we speak in a way that people hear? So how do we speak out there in the world to make a difference? And it starts with how do we listen to each other? We need listening. And I think the community can be incredibly strengthened by listening to each other in the way we do speaking circles. Speaking circles turn from just getting over stage fright to where people now come not for that, but because they work out. They get to work out something that they need to, and they surrender to the listening, and things happen. When you give up your plan and just be with. What I've learned from veganism, there's an ideal pure form of eating, and I'm bringing an ideal pure form of listening that matches. Because we think we know listening, but the listening that we can do, that we generally do, is so shallow compared to putting a certain attention on it. The first guideline is the listeners are having co-mindful holding a space. You're doing all the work. Hopefully it's very satisfying to hold a space like this and see how people come alive in it. So you get the listeners doing all the work, and up here the idea is I'm with you until I leave you. I see you. I have a higher priority. I'm actually seeing you so you feel seen than I have on making sense. And over a period of time, I know I can make sense without ever having to leave you. And then I don't even leave you until I notice I'm leaving. And I'm absolutely with you. That's the pure form of this work. I'm absolutely with you. This works in public speaking beyond belief. That's where your ums just sink and dissolve, because if I'm really with you, there's no ums to be had. There are silences, stillnesses. I call this sometimes the pleasure principle of public speaking, because tap into the pleasure of the company and being held by these amazing people. Hold me with your eyes. That's my love song.
So I grew up vegetarian, so I've actually never tried meat or animals. But I grew up eating dairy, but I recently went vegan about a year ago, or mostly vegan, a vegan in progress. So I'm really passionate about helping animals, basically, reducing suffering. Yeah, and I wrote a book on it this year, self-published book. And I teach yoga, so it's part of yoga philosophy to educate not to eat animals as vegetarian. So I've been doing this kind of for 20 years talking about it minimally. And over the years, the more I teach yoga, the more I've gotten more concerned about helping the animals, even though I always want to help people, but I'm really more happy if people learn to stop eating animals more than the yoga itself.
I became a vegetarian in my heart at the age of 6. At that time, I'm the youngest of 4 in my family, and we lived in Washington State. My brother and my sisters had animals. They had pets. And they had big animals. They had horses and a dog. And I wanted a pet of my own. And so my mother said, okay, you can have pets. You can have chickens. I'm like, chickens? Okay, all right, I'll have chickens. And there was a little chicken pen that my dad built, and this little flock of chickens were mine. And so precious little 6-year-old every day would go out and check on them and get eggs and, give them feed. And they had names. They were my pets. And one day I came home from school and found my mother and the cleaning lady had beheaded the rooster and were plucking his feathers. That rooster had a name. That was my pet. And it's not like we were poor. We didn't need the food. I was shocked and horrified and in tremendous pain. And my family mocked me. And I remember, trying to muster all the courage and bravery and strength that I could, being the youngest in this family, to make a stand and say, I'm not eating chicken. I'm not eating meat anymore. And my siblings would tease me. Like every time we had chicken for dinner, they would joke and mock and say, that's your pet. And I learned somehow to push that down and take it as normal. I mean, we take as normal what we're raised with, what our environment is. And yet something in me continued to foster this feeling of it's not right, it's not correct, and it's not the way that I want to live. I submerged that feeling for a long time, so that's why I say I became a vegetarian in my heart as a child.
I'm 56, is that how old I am? So, and it's only 2.5 years, actually a little less than 2.5 years, I saw the movie Cowspiracy, and that was my wake-up call. That was the one, the straw that broke my animal eater's back, because by that time I was an environmentalist who stood up and advocated for trees. There's pictures in the background around here of people communing with trees, so I'm a forest advocate. I do it that way by making artwork of people communing. I still do get up and speak and talk about the importance of forest and trees in our lives. And yet, it wasn't until I saw the movie Cowspiracy that I got that the number one reason we cut down trees is to raise cattle for human consumption. I'm so far removed from, the slaughter of animals, the killing of animals. And of course, the more you read about it, the more you learn that's quite intentional. It has to be that way. As the saying goes, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, most people, all people, many people would be vegetarian. The people who hunted, the few hunters I knew growing up in Westchester County, New York, and New York City, who were deer hunters or turkey hunters, I guess, that would be about it where I was. I would, judge them, sometimes overtly, as you do in New York, out loud, and tell them what you fucking think. That they were, cruel and mean, and how could they do that? And then, God, it's such an education in life. Well, years later I learned, the truth of it is, what I was doing was vastly more cruel. An animal is born into slavery and treated as an object and then killed in a factory setting, as opposed to a wild deer lives and then one day, is killed with a bow and arrow or a gun, whatever. That's far more compassionate. So I was completely as we say back east, full of shit. The first time I remember, as a 12 or 13, I was trying to figure out when this was, 12 or 13 years old, a PBS documentary in a living room in Mount Kisco, New York, on it was a black and white, like a small Zenith TV. And it was the first time I saw footage of assembly line cattle going down and getting the bolt gun in the head, falling, lifted up, cut open with a saw. And just, I mean, it was Auschwitz for cows, or Cowschwitz, as the joke is called these days. So those images are super powerful and were seared into my little brain. But I had zero support. No one else saw that with me. I was alone watching that. Family wasn't, I didn't know vegetarians, certainly not vegan. That wasn't even the term. And this is in the 60s, mid-60s, late 60s, 70, somewhere in there. So, like, I saw that, didn't know how to associate it with the salami and the pastrami and the bologna in the fridge, and I went back to my ways. And that's just one of 3 or 4 stories that come to mind right now about there's something there. And I never forgot seeing those images, but I didn't connect the dots. I had no support. I needed community to connect the dots, and then have something, a change of behavior, a change of heart come from that.
I was born an animal lover, very much down to the core. I certainly was given dolls as a child, never really had interest in playing with the dolls. I had stuffed animals, and I had a lot of them, and I had relationships, such as a child can, with all my little animals, and I swapped out which animals I slept with every night so that nobody would feel left out. And looking back on how I was raised, I'm kind of pissed that I kind of feel betrayed by my family and by my society. Like, I was an animal lover, and I knew I was an animal lover, and yet it seemed really okay and normal for me to eat chicken and pork, and I ate all of it till I was in my, mid-20s, when I think it was a spiritual teacher who came into town and had some big article from the New York Times about, I think it was called How to Win an Argument with a Meat Eater. And it really had all of these bullet points. I was like, wow. And my mother and I both read it at the same time, and just bam, went vegetarian. So that's how I really started to shift my eating to match what my heart always was, always. I didn't go vegan till a few years ago, and it was for health stuff. I had like congestion, mucousy stuff that just never went away, and I knew from previous experiments that if I got rid of the dairy, I would get totally cleared up and feel great. Like, I know what I need to do. And then once I did it, I noticed my conscience, I didn't realize that I think I kind of felt guilty all along, because I became really aware when the guilt was lifted. I felt way more like all of a sudden aligned with who I am inside and how I eat. The more I'm around vegans, the more I educate myself, the more it just reinforces what a good and important decision I've made. I'm so grateful.